"You're making a mistake." The words were sharp, as though the very air in the room had been slashed open with a blade. General Amos Blackwell's voice rang out, commanding the attention of the alien warlords gathered around the central table. His eyes, aged but sharp, locked with the sneering gaze of Zorth Marik, who was hunched over a glowing laser plasma display, examining Earth's fragile defenses. Zorth Marik didn't even flinch. He flicked his clawed hand, sending ripples across the planetary map projected before him. "The mistake, human, will be yours." His voice was low, thick with condescension. "You think your species, so broken, so desperate, can stand against the might of the Imperium." The alien's multiple eyes glowed with a predatory gleam, his focus shifting from the data on the screen to the frail human in the room. Blackwell stood firm, ignoring the sneer in Zorth Marik's voice. He had been in enough war rooms to recognize the arrogance of the powerful, too often mistaken for wisdom. His weathered fingers pressed against the cool surface of the display, feeling the slight vibration beneath his touch as the map updated with the alien fleet's next target, Earth. The War Council watched in silence. Their faces were twisted with a mix of curiosity and amusement. To them, Blackwell was just an old relic, a strategist of a defeated race. His warning, like a scream in the void, would be easily drowned out by the weight of their technological superiority. "The mistake," Blackwell continued, his voice unwavering, "is thinking that your firepower will win you this war. You're not facing a conventional enemy, you're facing humans." He could feel their eyes on him, their skepticism thick enough to cut through. He'd been through this dance before, too many times. He could see their hesitation, the unspoken question they all shared. What could a species like humanity possibly offer in the face of the Imperium's might? "You underestimate us," Blackwell said, his voice dropping to a level that made even the hardest of the alien warlords pause. "Your weapons might tear apart cities, but they'll never destroy what makes us dangerous. The truth is, you're not fighting for dominance. You're fighting for survival." The tension in the room shifted, but the council remained unmoved. Zorth Marik stepped forward, his silhouette towering, his voice laced with venom. "You speak of survival, but all I see is a dying species clinging to the last remnants of their past. The galaxy is ours, and soon so will be your world. You are nothing more than a fleeting spark that will be snuffed out in the cold vacuum of space." Blackwell's lips curled into a tight smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "A spark is all it takes to light a fire, and when your fleets fall, you'll realize that the spark you thought insignificant is the very thing that will burn you." His words hung in the air, a challenge that few of the alien warlords had ever faced. An enemy they could not predict, a force they could not analyze on a cold, mechanical scale. The tension was palpable, thick enough to taste, as Blackwell's piercing gaze swept over the council. He had seen their kind before, alien, calculating, believing in the might of technology over the unpredictability of the human spirit. They were convinced that no force in the galaxy could rival their empire. The warlords exchanged silent glances. Zarthok, the smallest of the council, with his jagged exoskeleton, leaned forward, his voice as sharp as the edges of his body. "And what exactly do you expect to accomplish, old man? Do you truly believe your planet can resist us? Your technology is primitive. Your forces are scattered and disjointed." Blackwell's jaw tightened. The room was stifling. Each breath felt heavier than the last as the cold, unyielding light from the laser plasma displays danced across the faces of the aliens. They hadn't seen the cracks forming in their own calculations. They hadn't seen the subtle revolution that had taken root in the human race over the last decades. Minds coming together, forces uniting, turning the impossible into a cruel reality for anyone who dared underestimate them. "They don't need to be unified," Blackwell said, his voice sharp as a dagger. "Not yet. But when you're lost in the jungles of Earth, fighting a war you can't comprehend, you'll wish you never landed." He stood taller now, the weight of history pressing down on him. "I've watched wars turn. I've seen invaders fall apart before their own eyes. And you will too." The aliens said nothing for a long while, their eyes flicking to one another, sensing the challenge in Blackwell's words. He could feel their doubt creeping in, but they were too proud to admit it. Instead, Zorth Merrick shifted uncomfortably, a flicker of irritation crossing his expression. "Enough of this rhetoric. It's clear you have no place in this council, Blackwell. You're dismissed." Blackwell's heart rate remained steady, his voice steady as steel. "You'll regret this. Mark my words. You've miscalculated humanity's greatest weapon. It's not your technology. It's not your numbers. It's our ability to adapt, to survive in the face of the impossible." With that, Blackwell turned and began walking toward the door, his boots heavy against the metallic floor. Behind him, the alien warlords sat in silence, but the doubt lingered in the air, like an unspoken challenge. They may have laughed off his warning, but Blackwell knew this moment would be remembered. He had planted the seed, and though it may take time, that seed would sprout into the chaos that would undo them. As he stepped out into the corridor, his mind raced, replaying the meeting over and over. There was no time to waste. The alien fleet was already on its way to Earth. Humanity's survival depended on more than just tactics. It depended on resilience, on the ability to turn the tide with whatever was at their disposal. And they would. Earth wasn't going to bow down quietly. Earth was going to fight. Blackwell's fingers tightened around the edge of the door as it hissed shut behind him. Blackwell stepped into the corridor, the sterile hum of the alien warship's infrastructure fading behind him. The door hissed shut, but his mind was already 5 steps ahead. The council's dismissal didn't sting. It simply cemented what he already knew. The aliens were convinced of their own invulnerability. It would be their undoing. He could already see the fractures forming in their overconfidence, but Earth had no time to savor such victories. Their planet was about to be overrun. The first waves of the alien fleet were already descending toward Earth, their arrival scheduled within the next few hours. Blackwell's mission was clear. He had to prepare humanity for the unimaginable. His call had gone out, but Earth wasn't united. It was a fractured, broken world, struggling to reclaim any semblance of order after the last global conflict. Walking through the dim corridors of the underground war room, Blackwell's boots reverberated with a quiet certainty. He wasn't sure if it was the floor or his own pulse thumping louder than usual, but there was a weight pressing down on him. He reached a small, flickering terminal on the wall and activated it. The laser plasma display sputtered for a moment before solidifying into a map of Earth, dotted with major cities, resource points, and key military installations. It was chaotic, scattered remnants of a civilization struggling to survive its own past mistakes. His fingers hovered over the display before a voice interrupted his thoughts. "General Blackwell, sir, you're needed in the strategy room." The voice belonged to Commander Jace Ellis, a man whose reputation had grown steadily since the early days of the conflict. Jace was sharp, tactical, methodical, but also brimming with the raw, emotional drive that had led him to command Earth's scattered defense forces. He was not a diplomat nor a politician, but in these desperate times, his leadership was exactly what Earth needed. Blackwell knew this. Still, Jace's impetuosity was something to keep an eye on. Blackwell turned to face the younger man, who stood at attention, his face hard, but not devoid of the kind of weariness that only a war had left behind. "How's the preparation coming?" Blackwell asked, stepping forward to meet Jace's gaze. "We're piecing it together, sir," Jace replied, "but we're stretched thin. Most of Earth's remaining military forces are scattered, and the factions, well, they're not all too eager to put their differences aside." His lips tightened. "Not without a fight, anyway." Blackwell gave him a hard look. "You don't have the luxury of time for this. The aliens won't wait for you to convince every stubborn fool to join the cause. Your strategy must be—" "Flexible?" Jace interrupted, arching an eyebrow. Blackwell's lips quirked, but there was no humor in his gaze. "Adaptable," he corrected, emphasizing the word. "That's what will make or break this war. They won't fight us the way they expect. Guerrilla tactics, sabotage, knowledge of our terrain, those will be the weapons we use. We fight in ways they can't predict, but we have to move quickly. Your people don't have the luxury of second chances." Jace's face darkened. And what if we fail? Then we don't. Blackwell's voice was firm, unwavering. Failure isn't an option, Commander. Not when the stakes are this high. We can't afford to lose Earth, our planet, our homes. If you have to make difficult choices, make them. But you do it quickly. As Jace nodded, Blackwell turned toward the war room, his boots clapping against the cold floor. He didn't have the luxury of comforting anyone right now. The enemy was at the gates, and the time for niceties was long gone. Inside the war room, the atmosphere was thick with anxiety, but also determination. The scattered remnants of Earth's military were coming together in small cells: survivalists, former soldiers, scientists, and engineers, all united by a single purpose. Blackwell saw them gathered around a large heads-up display, each face grim, yet alive with the fire of a people who refused to simply roll over and die. "All right," Blackwell began, cutting through the murmur of voices. His gaze swept over the room, locking eyes with every man there. "You've all heard what I said to the Council, but let me make one thing perfectly clear. These aliens won't fall from a frontal assault. We're not going to march in, guns blazing. We're going to be more clever than that. Guerrilla warfare, we strike fast, we hit where it hurts, and we pull back before they even know what happened." Lieutenant Soren Vance, a younger, more reckless tactician with a sharp mind and an itch for action, stood up from his seat at the table, eyes flicking between Blackwell and the assembled team. "They won't know what hit them. We've got the element of surprise on our side. I say we start by cutting off their supply lines. If we can sabotage their transport hubs and communication, they'll be flying blind." Colonel Thorne Mackay, a seasoned soldier with a no-nonsense attitude, leaned forward, his voice low but filled with experience. "And what of their fleets, sir?" "We've seen their tech. It's more advanced than anything we've got." He paused, his eyes darkened with the weight of the question. "How do we counter that?" Blackwell's gaze was distant for a moment, and when he spoke again, it was with a quiet intensity. "We use their arrogance against them. They'll underestimate the terrain. They'll think they can simply land, crush our defenses, and march right through the cities. But Earth's not a battlefield they've trained for. The jungle, the mountains, the high-gravity zones, they'll be our weapons. They won't know how to fight in an environment they didn't design their technology for. That's where we'll hit them hardest." "Then we hit them where they're weakest," Vance added, grinning. "Keep them guessing. We can use biological warfare. Our planet's got plants and bacteria they've never encountered. If we weaponize that—" Blackwell's expression hardened. "We'll use whatever we can, but we must tread carefully. We won't descend into savagery. We use our mind, our environment, and our ingenuity. But we don't let them push us to the brink of becoming what we hate." Vance nodded, the glint of excitement in his eyes tempered by the gravity of Blackwell's words. "Understood." The map of Earth shifted on the heads-up display as the plan began to take shape. Areas of Earth's terrain that could provide ambush points, hidden supply routes, and points of natural defense were highlighted. Each part of Earth, from dense jungles to the arid deserts, became an obstacle in the alien advance. The mission was clear: use the land, the people, the forgotten technologies of Earth to wage a war no one had anticipated. As the meeting continued, the plans and strategies began to fall into place, but there was a tension in the room, an unease that hadn't dissipated since the Council. Earth had been dealt a brutal blow before, and there were still so many variables to account for. Yet Blackwell knew one thing for certain: the aliens had no idea what they were walking into. They had underestimated humanity's greatest weapon, their ability to adapt. And by the time the aliens realized their mistake, it would be far too late. The display flickered briefly, showing the alien fleet now descending into Earth's atmosphere. Blackwell straightened, looking out at the faces of the men around him, their expressions hardened by the weight of the task ahead. "Get ready," he said softly, but with a resolve that cut through the room like a blade. The air in the command center crackled with urgency. Outside, the night was punctuated by the distant rumble of alien ships as they descended into Earth's atmosphere, but inside, the world felt suffocatingly still. The screens flickered erratically as the latest satellite data blinked in front of Blackwell's eyes. He leaned in closer, his eyes tracing the locations of the alien fleet, their vast numbers now scattered across Earth's surface. "Not fast enough," he muttered, more to himself than anyone in the room. His fingers hovered over the keys, sending commands to the laser plasma display, zooming in on one of the alien ships. Despite the relentless threat of invasion, his mind was racing in a way only true strategy could incite, calculating the inevitable, anticipating every move, as if he could already feel the ground beneath him shaking from the approaching conflict. "How much longer?" asked Jace, his voice raw with the edge of exhaustion. He had been running on adrenaline for days now, yet the weight of every decision was palpable. The relentless pressure to unite humanity, to push back an enemy so confident of their victory, was starting to show in his tired eyes. Blackwell didn't answer immediately. The hum of the laser plasma displays filled the silence between them, giving way to the faint sound of the rain tapping against the reinforced windows. He felt it, the tension in the room, the pressure building, not just from the alien presence but from the burden of command. But he knew that the trick to surviving was simple: focus on the next move. And the next move was already in motion. "Not long," Blackwell finally said, his voice steady. "The first wave will land within hours. You've got what you need, Commander." Jace glanced at the teams gathered around the center. The screens illuminated their faces in sharp, angular patterns, casting the room in a dim glow. Around them, the chaos of preparation felt somehow out of sync with the calmness in Blackwell's words. They were all preparing for something they couldn't fully anticipate. The strategies were set, but there was always the unpredictability of warfare. There was always the unknown. Jace exhaled slowly, his eyes scanning the map of Earth's surface. "We'll need more than surprise tactics if we're going to hold them off. The terrain, it's not enough. Their tech—" Blackwell cut him off. "Their tech is their weakness. You're seeing it, aren't you? Look at their landing zones. They'll be dropping right into our most unpredictable environments. Jungles, high-gravity zones, old battlefields. They won't be able to move as freely as they think." The room quieted as everyone turned their attention to the heads-up displays, now highlighting Earth's most rugged, difficult terrain. Dense, ancient forests, where visibility would be reduced to mere feet. Desolate mountain ranges with harsh weather conditions. The swamps and canyons where alien boots would sink deep into thick mud. The perfect environments to break their sense of control. Jace finally nodded, but his fingers remained stiff on the table. "We're ready for this. But Blackwell, there's something not right. We're seeing their ships drop and land, but they're not engaging with the planet's surface as we thought. It's almost too smooth." Blackwell's mind sharpened at Jace's words, a flicker of doubt creeping into his chest. "Too smooth?" Jace gestured to the map, and Blackwell's eyes narrowed as the image came into sharper focus. The alien fleet's deployment was too orderly, their landings too synchronized. The ships landed with military precision, too much so. There was an unsettling stillness about it. It was like watching a predator carefully stalk its prey, each move calculated, controlled. "I think we're being set up," Jace said quietly. "This isn't the clumsy invasion we anticipated. There's something else here, some kind of strategy we haven't accounted for." Blackwell felt his pulse quicken. The confidence he had shown earlier, the belief that they could use their terrain and ingenuity, was suddenly frail. This wasn't just an attack. It was something more. He pressed a few keys, zooming in on the alien ships, their movement patterns. It didn't take long for his suspicion to become reality. Hidden beneath the surface of their military presence was something else, a web of energy pulses radiating outward, silently interfering with the planet's electromagnetic fields. A low-level disruption, a weakness that Earth hadn't even realized it had yet. "We've got a bigger problem," Blackwell muttered under his breath, his eyes scanning the display. "They've compromised our communication grids, our satellites. They're useless." The realization hit like a freight train. Without communications, their plans would be in disarray. No coordination, no warnings, just chaos. Earth's scattered resistance, which had been their greatest advantage, was now facing one of its most crippling blows. "We need to act now," Jace said, his voice firm despite the mounting tension in his chest. "We can't wait. They've taken the first step. We take the next one. No hesitation." But Blackwell's mind wasn't on immediate retaliation. He looked to the display once more. In the far corner of the screen, a strange reading flickered. At first, he thought it was a malfunction, but when the signature appeared again, sharper this time, he knew it wasn't. His fingers moved quickly across the display, pulling up scans of the surrounding terrain. "What is that?" Jace asked, leaning over his shoulder. "It's not from them," Blackwell replied, eyes narrowing. "It's human." "What?" Jace's voice rose with disbelief. "Impossible. We don't have any forces in that region." Blackwell's gut twisted as the implications began to sink in. There was a presence in the mountains, something hidden beneath the alien radar. Humanity, or perhaps something that had been forgotten. An old weapon, a relic from the past, stirring to life after all these years. "Someone else is out there," Blackwell murmured. "Someone who hasn't shown their hand yet." Jace turned to face the command center. "How long until we can track them?" "Less than an hour," Blackwell said, a spark of hope igniting in his chest. "But this changes everything. If it's what I think it is, we've got a fighting chance." As the minutes dragged on, Blackwell's mind raced. Who or what had been hiding in the mountains? The energy readings were clear. It was human-made, and it was unlike anything they had expected to find. Old technology, perhaps, or something buried in the ashes of humanity's past conflicts. The lights in the room flickered as the first of the alien assault squads began to move. Earth's resistance was about to be tested, and every strategy, every calculation, would come down to the unknown, the secret force hidden beneath the Earth. "I don't know who it is," Jace said, his tone serious. "But if they're human, they're not with us. Not yet." Blackwell locked eyes with him, his voice low. "Doesn't matter. Whoever they are, they're our best shot at turning this war around." The clock was ticking, and the first alien steps into Earth's forgotten battlegrounds were only the beginning. What was waiting in the shadows of the mountains could tip the scales, but the real question remained. Would they be able to harness whatever this new force was before it was too late? As the war escalated, both the enemy and their own people remained unpredictable. Earth's survival hung on the thinnest of threads, and in the distance, Blackwell could almost feel the weight of something ancient stirring. And yet, one truth remained. Humanity would adapt, or it would perish. But for now, they would fight with whatever they had, and that was enough to survive just a little longer. The tension in the command center reached a fever pitch. Outside, the distant rumble of alien ships descending reverberated through the walls, vibrating the very air as the enemy's invasion began to unfold. The alien fleet had arrived with brutal efficiency, landing in carefully coordinated waves across Earth's surface. The planet's defenses, fragile and scattered, barely had time to react. Yet something had shifted in the last few minutes, something neither Blackwell nor Jace had fully anticipated. "I've never seen this before," Jace muttered, his eyes glued to the heads-up display, where the readouts of alien troop movements flashed across the screen. He leaned forward, brow furrowed, as a line of alien vehicles moved deeper into Earth's highlands, their sensors seemingly unable to detect the anomaly that Blackwell had spotted. "They're off course. There's something messing with their targeting system." Blackwell watched the display with a stillness that was unsettling. The energy signatures emanating from the mountains were unmistakable, human-made. The earlier thought in his mind now clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The readings weren't just another piece of humanity's forgotten technology, they were a warning. "Do we have confirmation?" Blackwell asked, his voice sharp but quiet. Jace glanced over his shoulder at the scattered team, who were working at their own stations, each absorbed in the urgent task of scrambling communications and managing defenses. Everyone was tense, aware of the critical moment they were in, But it was clear that the unexpected readings had thrown a wrench in their understanding of the situation. The unknown force was no longer an enigma. It was a ticking clock. "We'll know in a few minutes," Jace replied, standing upright and running a hand through his hair. His fingers trembled slightly, betraying his cool exterior. "But if what we're seeing is true, then the aliens aren't prepared for what's coming." The steady, mechanical hum of the system contrasted with the sharp crackling of the atmosphere outside. Blackwell stood still, absorbing the weight of their words. If the unknown technology in the mountains was indeed human, they had a chance. A slim one. But it was a chance. Earth wasn't entirely defenseless after all. It hadn't been forgotten. Whatever this hidden force was, it had been lying dormant, like an ancient weapon waiting to be resurrected. A voice broke through his thoughts. "General?" Colonel Mackay's gruff tone carried across the room. His face was lit in the dim glow of the laser plasma screens, his gaze focused but wary. "They've started deploying ground forces. If that tech's going to give us an edge, now's the time. We don't have much more breathing room." Blackwell turned, locking eyes with Mackay. "Get me the coordinates. Jace, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with." For a moment, there was only the noise of fingers on keyboards, the sharp tap of each keystroke punctuating the silence. The map of Earth flickered, and the heads-up display zoomed in on the mountain range, highlighting the energy surges that were still radiating from the region. The data was clearer now. There was something hidden underneath the surface, something far larger than what Blackwell had anticipated. "It's an old installation," Jace murmured, his eyes widening as he pieced the data together. "This isn't just some forgotten weapons cache. This is something more." Blackwell's pulse quickened, his mind racing. "A bunker? A secret base?" "No," Jace replied, his voice grim. "It's a compound, a facility we didn't even know existed. From what I can tell, it's been operating in isolation for decades. It's got its own power grid, autonomous defense systems, almost as if it was waiting for something." The weight of Jace's words hung in the air. Waiting. Waiting for what? For this exact moment? For the aliens to arrive? Blackwell didn't have time for questions. He had a plan to execute, and every second counted. "Prepare a team," Blackwell barked. "We're going in. Full extraction. I want that base secured, and I want to know what the hell is inside. This isn't just a tech relic. There's more to this than we realize." The room went quiet as the team processed the command. The weight of it settled on them, but Blackwell could feel their resolve harden. Every man in this room understood the stakes, understood that this was no longer just about defending Earth. It was about discovering their last hope. Jace turned to the men around him. "You heard the general. Prepare for the worst. We'll move fast, we'll move hard, and we don't stop until we have answers." The team scrambled to ready themselves. The scent of stale air in the command center was suddenly too thick, oppressive in the face of the unknown. Blackwell's fingers hovered over the controls once more, finalizing the deployment plan. The heads-up displays flashed a warning. Something had changed. "General," Jace called out, his voice sharp with urgency. "They're advancing faster than expected. The alien ground forces are moving toward the facility now." "Get the team moving," Blackwell ordered, feeling the stir of anxiety tighten his chest. Time was slipping away. They had to get ahead of the alien advance, or they might lose their only chance to turn the tide. The team hustled into action, weapons in hand, heavy boots pounding the floor as they made their way to the exit. Blackwell lingered for a moment, taking one last look at the laser plasma displays. The compound was marked now, the last hope for humanity's survival, hidden in plain sight. The facility's exact purpose was still unclear, but there was no time for hesitation. The mysterious energy signatures suggested that whatever was hidden beneath the mountains was powerful. It was humanity's trump card, and Blackwell had no intention of letting the aliens claim it first. As Blackwell and his team reached the shuttle bay, the air was electric, thick with anticipation. Outside, the ground trembled. The first of the alien squads had touched down, their heavy footfalls echoing in the distance. The countdown to the mission began. "All units are in position," Jace called out, his face set in determination. "We go now." Blackwell nodded. For Earth, for humanity. The shuttle's engines roared to life, cutting through the tension like a blade. As the doors sealed shut behind them, Blackwell felt a quiet sense of finality. The mountain awaited them, an ancient stronghold that could either save them or doom them. But as the shuttle lifted off, heading toward the unknown, Blackwell's thoughts couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into something far bigger than they'd ever prepared for. And whatever was buried in those mountains would either ignite the rebellion or burn them to the ground. The unknown lay ahead, a riddle only time could solve. The shuttle banked sharply as it tore through the dense cloud cover, the starlit sky above fading into a murky, humid layer of mist that clung to everything. Inside the cabin, Blackwell gripped the armrest, his gaze fixed on the display screen that illuminated the cramped space. The facility's coordinates blinked steadily in the corner, a constant reminder of their perilous mission. The silence was thick, save for the occasional hissing of oxygen valves and the low rumble of the shuttle's engines as they sliced through the atmosphere. Jace sat across from him, a quiet storm brewing behind his tired eyes. He didn't speak, but Blackwell could feel the tension rippling off him, the weight of uncertainty and urgency pressing down on them both. The briefing had been brief, the plan set in motion with little more than an outline. Too much unknown, but too little time to question it. They had to take the facility before the aliens, and they had to do it fast. "This could go sideways," Jace finally muttered, breaking the silence. His voice, strained but steady, reflected the weight of the situation. "You know that, right? If this place is what I think it is, it's humanity's best shot." Blackwell cut him off, his tone a mix of resolve and unease. "We don't have the luxury of doubts, not anymore." Jace nodded, his lips pressing into a tight line as he gazed out the small viewport. "No room for mistakes." The shuttle lurched slightly as it began its descent toward the compound. Blackwell's eyes never left the display. His mind raced with strategies, possibilities, every scenario unfolding in his head at a dizzying speed. His hands, though steady, betrayed the pulse of adrenaline coursing through him. He didn't show it, couldn't show it, but deep down, he knew this was the moment. Humanity's fate wasn't just in their hands. It was in the unknown they were flying toward. Whatever this compound held, it would either save them or seal their doom. The ground rushed up beneath them as they neared the facility, nestled in a canyon surrounded by jagged rock formations. The earth here was harsh, unforgiving, perfect for hiding something dangerous. Blackwell could almost feel the weight of whatever lay within pressing against his chest. 5 minutes, Jace said, his eyes darting to the clock flashing on the heads-up display. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it now. "We drop in hot. Quick in, quick out. If there's any resistance—" "There will be," Blackwell interrupted, his voice sharp. "You're underestimating the aliens. They'll have eyes everywhere. But they don't know about this facility. They don't know what's waiting in there." Jace met his gaze, the weight of his next words lingering in the air. "And we don't either." Blackwell leaned back in his seat, taking a deep breath. He didn't have time for doubts now. They would find out soon enough. They would either turn the tide, or they would burn. The shuttle touched down, the impact jarring enough to rattle everyone in their seats. The hatch opened with a hiss, revealing the dark expanse of the compound, bathed in eerie, dim light. The compound stood like a silent sentinel, its metal walls reflecting nothing but shadows. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of rust and something metallic, the stillness in stark contrast to the chaos of the battle unfolding outside. "Let's move," Blackwell ordered. The team surged forward, weapons in hand, feet hitting the cold concrete of the compound's landing pad. The sound of boots on metal echoed in the empty expanse as they fanned out, alert and tense. The silence was oppressive, almost suffocating. Something about the stillness didn't sit right with Blackwell. It was too quiet. It felt like they were walking into a trap. The facility stretched out before them, a labyrinth of corridors and industrial rooms. The walls were lined with old, rusted machinery, long dormant yet seemingly untouched by time. Blackwell's senses were heightened, every scrape of metal, every soft echo bouncing off the walls. The oppressive darkness seemed to close in on them, swallowing the space around them. They moved quickly, the low clink of their weapons the only sound breaking the silence. As they advanced deeper into the compound, the heads-up displays blinked, marking out their path, guiding them through the maze of empty rooms and hallways. Each room was filled with relics, equipment that hadn't seen the light of day in decades. Dust settled in the corners, as if the place had been left alone, forgotten. But Blackwell knew better. This wasn't a tomb. This was a bunker, and it was about to wake up. "Hold," Jace whispered sharply, holding his hand up. The team froze in place, their bodies tense, ears straining for any sound beyond the silence. Blackwell's eyes narrowed. He could feel it now, the faint vibration in the air, the hum of an energy source coming to life. Whatever had been dormant for so long was stirring, and they were right in its path. A sudden light flickered in the distance, illuminating the next hallway with an unnatural glow. It was a strange, cold light, like something out of a dream or a nightmare. Blackwell motioned for the team to follow, their footsteps barely making a sound on the cold floor. They reached the source of the light, a massive door, ancient yet still intact. It was covered in strange symbols, the markings of an era long past, but unmistakably human. There was a low rumble, as though the very walls of the compound were beginning to awaken. Blackwell approached the door, his breath shallow as he surveyed the mechanism. He could feel the heat from the ancient machinery building beneath the surface, a pulse that quickened with every passing second. "Ready," Jace murmured, eyes scanning the door's strange lock mechanism. He stepped forward, his fingers working quickly as the team gathered around. The air seemed to grow heavier, the silence stretching between them like a taut wire. The door clicked open, and a flood of cool air rushed in, carrying with it the taste of something stale, old, decaying, but alive with the promise of power. Inside, the room was vast, lined with rows of dormant machinery, each piece gleaming in the dim light. But it wasn't the technology that caught Blackwell's eye. It was what stood at the center, a massive cylindrical object, humbling in its size, pulsed with an eerie energy. It was unlike anything Blackwell had ever seen, sleek, angular, almost organic in its design. He could feel the force radiating from it, like the beating heart of the facility itself. Blackwell took a deep breath. "This is it," he said quietly. "This is humanity's final weapon." Jay stepped forward, eyes wide with disbelief. "But what is it?" Before Blackwell could answer, the walls trembled. The compound seemed to awaken fully, as though the ancient machine had been waiting for their touch. Lights flickered violently, casting strange shadows across the room. And in that moment they understood. The real battle wasn't just against the alien invaders outside. It was against whatever this was. Something was about to change. The final gamble had begun. But would this mysterious force be a no? The ground trembled again, sharper this time, rattling the walls as Blackwell's team stood frozen in the heart of the compound. The strange machine pulsed with unnatural energy, sending ripples through the room, and for a moment, Blackwell felt the air thickening, as if the very atmosphere was alive, responding to their intrusion. The facility, long dormant, had stirred to life with a force that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Whatever humanity had hidden here, whatever secrets the past had buried, were now on the verge of being unleashed. "Is this really it?" Jace's voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension that had settled over the room like a thick fog. His eyes were wide, scanning the alien machinery before them with a mix of disbelief and reluctant awe. "We've spent centuries fighting, bleeding, and now we find this." Blackwell's eyes never left the pulsating core in the center of the room. His mind raced, piecing together the fragments of information that had slowly been coming into focus. This wasn't just a weapon, it was a key. To what exactly, he wasn't entirely sure, but he could feel it in his bones. This machine was humanity's last card, the one that had been buried away for reasons no one alive could explain. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. "Move in," Blackwell commanded, his voice tight with urgency. We don't know how long we have before the aliens realize what we've found. We need to secure this. His team, silent and alert, fanned out, moving cautiously toward the machine. The air was cool but oppressive, the space around them still too perfect, too eerily quiet. The faint hiss of their breath echoed inside their helmets as they approached the center of the room, where the pulse of the machine intensified with each step they took. Jace reached forward first, his fingers trembling slightly as they brushed against the smooth, metallic surface of the device. As he made contact, the room seemed to shudder, the walls vibrating ever so slightly as the machine reacted. A low, grinding sound filled the air, something ancient awakening, an old mechanism reluctant to give up its secrets. Blackwell's eyes sharpened. "Don't touch anything unless we know what it is," he ordered, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. The uncertainty gnawed at him now. Every instinct screamed at him to move quickly, but every instinct also warned him that rushing forward blindly could be their undoing. The team stood motionless, scanning the room, their weapons at the ready. A few seconds passed in tense silence before the first of the systems began to light up. The laser plasma displays around the room flickered on, showing strange symbols and ancient schematics of weaponry, images and designs that none of them recognized. The screens hummed, bright lines of data streaming across the walls in languages they couldn't translate. This was no ordinary military technology. It was something far beyond Earth's understanding. Jace stepped back, shaking his head. This isn't just a weapon. This is a system. It's like nothing we've ever seen. Blackwell finished for him, his gaze fixed on the schematic now flashing before them. There were intricate networks of data linking parts of the facility, each section of the base coming online one by one, as if waiting for this moment. Blackwell's heart pounded as the realization hit him. This facility wasn't just humanity's hidden asset. It was a power source. A weapon, yes, but more than that. It was humanity's failsafe, something left behind by a civilization that had foresaw their own downfall. The lights in the compound flickered one last time before stabilizing, casting long shadows that stretched across the floor. The machine hummed louder now, its energy becoming more erratic, more volatile. The pulsing intensified, and Blackwell could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. His gut tightened. Something was wrong. "We need to move," Blackwell said urgently, his voice sharper now. "This thing's going to overload." But before he could issue further orders, the ground beneath them quaked again. The tremor was so violent it knocked several of them off balance. The laser plasma displays went black for a moment, then blinked back to life, this time with more urgency. An alarm began to blare through the compound, a deep resonating sound that rattled the very foundation. "Shit!" Jace hissed, stumbling to his feet. "What's happening?" Blackwell didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on the schematic, which was now flashing a series of red warnings. He knew what this was, the last stage of whatever system had been set in motion. They had activated something ancient, something that had been dormant for so long it no longer recognized humanity as its masters. "We triggered the system," Blackwell said grimly. "And it's reacting. This isn't just a weapon, it's an entire defense network. We need to shut it down now or it'll destroy everything." "We don't have time," Mackay growled, his eyes flicking to the displays as they continued to flash with chaotic, unreadable data. "The aliens will be on us in minutes. What do you want us to do?" Blackwell's mind raced. He had never expected this, a self-sustaining system with layers of protection far beyond anything humanity could have ever dreamed of. "We don't have the luxury of shutting it down. We need to contain it." Jace's voice was frantic now. "Contain it? We can't—" "Trust me, Jace," Blackwell cut in, his voice resolute. "We use it. We turn their technology against them." The words hung in the air, each syllable laden with weight. The idea was reckless, dangerous even. But it was the only option left. The facility wasn't just a weapon. It was a deterrent. If they could harness its energy, if they could turn it against the aliens, it would give Earth a fighting chance. A real fighting chance. Blackwell's fingers danced over the now lit controls, trying to decipher the alien symbols on the screen. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and the air in the room grew warmer, suffocating with every passing second. They had no time left. "You sure about this?" Jace asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Blackwell didn't answer, his focus locked on the console. With a steady hand, he initiated the sequence that would link Earth's last defense system with the alien grid, activating a failsafe that hadn't been used in centuries. The room hummed with power, the machines coming to life with an intensity that threatened to tear the walls apart. "Now," Blackwell said, his voice low, "we give them everything we've got." As the facility roared to life, the ground beneath them shook once more. The walls began to crack, and the sound of alien ships approaching filled the air. But Earth's last hope had awoken, and Blackwell knew that, for better or worse, this was the point of no return. The final gamble had been placed, and they had no choice but to see it through. The vibrations from the facility's core rattled the walls like a beast awakening from its slumber. Blackwell's breath quickened, his fingers trembling as they hovered over the controls. The laser plasma displays flashed erratically, the lights overhead flickering violently. For a brief moment, Blackwell feared the facility might tear itself apart, unable to handle the sudden surge of energy. Yet in that chaos, the room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with the kind of tension that held its breath before everything collapsed. "Move!" he barked, his voice cutting through the rising panic in the air. The team sprang into action, but even their coordinated movements seemed futile against the overwhelming power surging through the compound. The strange hum, like a distant growl reverberating through the floors, pulsed with greater intensity. Blackwell's skin tingled with a sense of foreboding. It was too much, too unpredictable. Whatever humanity had unleashed, it was no longer in their hands. "General, we're losing control," Mackay shouted, his voice strained, face drenched in sweat as he slammed his fist against a console. "The core's unstable. If we don't cut the power, we'll be caught in the explosion." But Blackwell didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the fluctuating data. The schematic was a blur, data streaming faster than he could process, and yet, amidst the chaos, a single thread of clarity pierced through. The weapon they had unlocked was more than just a defense mechanism. It was something else entirely. A communication system, an energy conduit that had been dormant for centuries, waiting for the right moment to awaken. "Can you stabilize it?" Jace's voice came from behind him, cutting through his thoughts. Blackwell's eyes flicked to the console in front of him. "We don't have time to stabilize it. We need to use it. We need to take the fight to them." Jace's hand shot out, grabbing Blackwell's arm with surprising force. "Are you hearing yourself? If this thing detonates, I know the risks." Blackwell wrenched his arm free, turning to face his team. "But we don't have a choice anymore. If we shut it down, the aliens will overrun Earth. If we unleash it, we've got one shot, one chance to turn the tide." The ground shifted beneath them again, a deep rumbling that seemed to echo from the bowels of the earth. The walls groaned in protest. Something was coming, and it wasn't just the alien fleets. This was bigger, more violent. The facility itself was drawing in the power, but now it seemed to be fighting them, rejecting its new masters. "The blast radius will wipe us all out," Mackay said, voice tight with desperation. His eyes darted between Blackwell and the systems running out of control on the laser plasma displays. "What if it doesn't work?" Blackwell didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pressed his fingers to the console, watching the data streams flicker like dying embers in a storm. He could almost feel the facility fighting back. The pulse of energy was growing erratic, pulsating in his chest like the beating of a drum, each beat bringing them closer to the edge. He had to act now. He didn't care about survival anymore. He cared about the survival of humanity. "Open the power conduit," Blackwell ordered, his voice low but unwavering. "Let it connect to their fleet." "You're out of your mind," Jace snapped, his face contorted with disbelief. "This could kill us all." "I'm aware," Blackwell replied, his voice thick with the weight of the decision. He turned to Mackay, whose face had gone pale. "We're out of time. Either we stop them now, or we let them crush us under their boots. Do it." Mackay hesitated, then nodded sharply. With trembling fingers, he manipulated the interface, opening the connection between the compound and the alien fleet. The laser plasma screens blinked one last time, then steadied, as if the facility itself had acknowledged the command. A low electric crackle filled the room, and for a moment, Blackwell thought he heard a voice, a whisper, inside his head. But there was no time to dwell on it. The countdown had begun. "We're locked in," Mackay said, his voice strained. "It's linked. The energy's flowing straight to their fleet." Blackwell straightened, the weight of what they had just unleashed hanging heavy on his shoulders. He knew the risk. He knew the consequences. The system was meant to be a weapon of mass destruction. It would tear apart the alien forces, yes, but it would also destroy anything in its path. It would overload, cascade, and... Then, as if in response to his thoughts, the facility groaned again. This time, it wasn't a tremor. It was the Earth itself reacting to the power surging through it. The walls rattled, and the sound of something far more ancient than anything they had ever encountered echoed through the compound. Blackwell could feel it deep in his bones, a primal resonance that sent a chill down his spine. "It's too much," Jace whispered, his eyes wide with realization. "We've unleashed something we can't control." But Blackwell didn't flinch. "We can't back down now." The energy built up, flooding the facility with a blinding light that sent shockwaves through the air. It was so intense, so overwhelmingly powerful, that Blackwell could feel the very molecules around him vibrating, straining against the weight of what they were doing. The laser plasma screens blinked, their once clear data now scrambling, the lights flashing in sync with the pulse of the machine. The air itself felt electric, thick with anticipation. A sudden deafening sound erupted from the core, like the tearing of space itself, followed by a violent explosion that shook the compound. The walls cracked, dust falling in thick clouds as the facility trembled under the weight of its own power. Blackwell's ears rang, his vision blurred from the force, but still, he stood unwavering. He knew the moment had come. Whether it was their salvation or their doom, they would have to ride the storm. Through the haze of dust and chaos, a new image flickered on the laser plasma displays. The alien fleet was in disarray. The energy conduit had done its job, severing their control, frying their systems. But the damage to the facility was catastrophic. They had just unleashed an EMP-like wave that would ripple out far beyond what they had intended. Blackwell's eyes locked onto Jace. There was no victory in their eyes, no relief. Just the grim realization that they had played their final card, and the outcome was still uncertain. "We've hit them," Jace said, voice hoarse. But at what cost? Blackwell's breath was shallow as he looked around the crumbling room. The facility was falling apart. The ground beneath them was collapsing, and there was no way to tell how much time they had left. "We'll find out soon enough," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the noise. And then everything went dark. The power went out completely, and the ground gave way beneath them. All Blackwell could feel was the cold embrace of oblivion closing in on them as the last vestiges of the facility's power flickered and died. Whatever was left, whatever humanity had left, was now in the hands of those who had survived. The countdown had ended. Now Earth would learn the true cost of survival. The darkness swallowed them whole. The violent tremor of the facility's collapse had left the team disoriented, their minds racing to catch up with the moment. The air felt thick, like smoke, only it wasn't smoke. It was the remnants of an energy blast, something deeper and older than they had ever anticipated. Blackwell's eyes flickered open, the world around him a blur of motion and dust. The laser plasma displays were dead, their once vibrant glow now replaced with nothing but the remnants of shattered screens. "Is everyone accounted for?" Blackwell's voice was rough, but steady. His pulse was pounding in his ears as he struggled to find his footing. The room was in shambles, the walls cracked, debris scattered everywhere. The only light came from faint flickers of emergency bulbs hanging from the ceiling, casting long shadows across the destroyed landscape. "I'm here," Jace's voice responded, shaky but intact. The sound of his boots scraping against the floor signaled his movement, and Blackwell felt a sense of relief. "Mackay? Vance?" "We're good, sir," Mackay answered, his voice gruff but steady. "Just a little banged up." Vance grunted from behind them. "I'll live. But this place, hell, this isn't what I signed up for." Blackwell nodded, his eyes scanning the wreckage of the facility. The room was barely recognizable, the machines and screens lying in pieces, half destroyed from the force of the energy release. The hum of the power that had once surged through the compound had been replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the distant echoes of falling debris. "It's done, but not over," Blackwell muttered. He turned toward the nearest control panel, but the screens were blank. "We've hit them, but not enough." Jace's face was illuminated by the weak emergency lighting as he crouched beside the remains of a broken console. His expression was tight, his brow furrowed in concentration as he ran his hands across the shattered circuits, looking for anything that would give them some way of understanding what they had unleashed. "The alien fleet, what's happening with them?" Jace asked, his voice tense. Blackwell's gaze darted to the partially functional heads-up display in the corner of the room. The data was garbled, scrambled, too much interference, but there were flashes of alien movement. The fleet was still intact, though disrupted. They were fighting back against the shockwave, trying to regain control. "Looks like we're not the only ones feeling the blast," Blackwell muttered. "They've taken damage, but they're adapting. That's the real problem." Mackay, who had been scanning the perimeter, turned back toward Blackwell. "We've stalled them, but the question is, for how long?" "We've bought time," Blackwell said, his voice measured. "Now we have to make the most of it. We need to figure out what we can use from this wreckage and use it fast. They're already mobilizing." Jace stood up, brushing dust from his uniform. "We've got enough tech here to work with. Some of it's still intact." His eyes flickered across the wreckage. "We could reverse engineer a few things, maybe disrupt their systems more, but it's going to take time." "We don't have time," Blackwell snapped, the weight of their situation sinking in. "The alien forces would regroup quickly, too quickly. We'll need to hit them harder, faster." A sudden realization flashed through him, and he turned to face the others. "It's not about their tech. It's about their confidence. We're hitting them where it hurts, but we need to make them believe they're losing everything. Psychological warfare. We need to break their morale." Jace looked at him, skeptical but intrigued. "You think we can do that? We're not exactly in the best position to play mind games." "We'll give them something to believe in," Blackwell said firmly. "We'll send a message, a calculated one. We hit their command ships, disrupt their communications. Then we make them think the fight is already lost." Mackay raised an eyebrow. "You're talking about a direct assault on their leadership?" "Exactly," Blackwell replied. "We've got the terrain, and we've got the advantage of surprise. They don't know where we'll strike next, and that's where they'll falter." Jace's lips twisted in thought, clearly unsure. "It's risky." Blackwell didn't flinch. "It's the only option we have left. We don't fight them head-on. We use their fear. We make them question their strength." The sound of the facility's emergency doors hissing open interrupted them, and the team's attention snapped toward the entrance. A figure emerged from the shadows, Ambassador Eric Haynes, his face etched with worry. His footsteps echoed as he approached, his movements quick and purposeful. "General," Haynes said, his voice urgent, "we've got reports from the front lines. The aliens are starting to reassert control, but they've lost their upper hand. They're scared," Blackwell finished for him. "Good. That's exactly what we need." Haynes gave a curt nod. "But we need to move quickly. They've regrouped faster than expected. We don't have much time before they start retaliating." "Then we do this now," Blackwell said. He turned toward the team. "We hit their command centers with everything we've got. We disrupt their communications and make them think we've got more firepower than we do. We'll need precision." Mackay was already plotting the course in his mind. "We can strike from the north, the mountains. They won't expect an assault from that angle, especially after what we just did." Jace nodded. "I'll work on the tech. We'll need to sabotage their communication satellites, disrupt their command systems. We've got enough equipment here to cause chaos, but we need to keep them guessing. I'll coordinate with the ground units, Haynes said, his face tight. We'll spread misinformation. Make it look like we've got forces in places we don't. Blackwell felt the weight of the plan settle over him. It was a gamble. They were working with scraps, using what little they had left. But it was the best shot they had. The next few hours would decide everything. We make them doubt everything they've been told, Blackwell said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. We hit them where it hurts, but we don't let them hit us back. We strike fast, and we disappear into the landscape. We keep them running in circles until they break. The team nodded, each one understanding their role. There was no hesitation now, no second thoughts. It was do or die. As Blackwell turned to leave, heading toward the shuttle bay, the weight of his decision pressed heavier on his chest. The alien fleet, though wounded, was far from defeated. But they had given Earth one final chance to prove they weren't the weak, fragile species the invaders had assumed. They would hit hard, strike fast, and with any luck, they would break the alien resolve. The next move was theirs, and they would make it count. The stakes had never been higher, and Blackwell knew that the success of their gamble would depend on their ability to keep their enemies guessing long enough to turn the tide. But in the back of his mind, a cold, lingering thought gnawed at him. What if the aliens adapted faster than they could anticipate? The moment the shuttle's hatch closed behind them, a sudden weight settled into the pit of Blackwell's stomach. He had led them into the heart of the storm, and now there was no turning back. The laser plasma displays in the shuttle blinked erratically as they ascended, but Blackwell didn't need the blinking icons or the distorted lines to know the truth. The alien fleets were recovering faster than they had anticipated. The time they had bought with their tactics was slipping away, and now Earth's last hope rested on one final blow. There was no room for error. "Hold your ground," Blackwell ordered, his voice steady despite the tension in his chest. "We hit them hard. We vanish into the hills. Make them chase ghosts." Jace, still grappling with the chaos of the last few hours, nodded, his face hard but his eyes betraying the strain. "You think we've got enough of a chance to pull this off?" "If we don't, Earth will be a memory," Blackwell replied, voice rough. "If they think they can wipe us out that easily, they'll learn quickly why underestimating humanity has never worked in anyone's favor." Behind them, Mackay adjusted his gear, his face a mask of calm. "You've got a hell of a lot of faith in this plan, General." Blackwell's gaze never left the view ahead. The alien ships in the distance had regrouped, their towering forms casting a shadow over the land. But the humans, hidden in their forests and mountains, remained invisible, yet ever so present. "I have faith in what's been done before. They're underestimating what we're capable of." The shuttle dove lower, cutting through the thick clouds above the mountain range, the landscape below giving them cover. The mission was set. Their strategy was clear. Strike at the heart of the alien leadership, sever their communications, and force their hands in a way that would break their resolve. But there was more to it than that. Humanity had always fought against insurmountable odds, and time again, it had been their ingenuity and adaptability that had tipped the scales in their favor. The aliens, with their advanced weaponry and their belief in technological superiority, hadn't counted on Earth's ability to shift, to evolve in the blink of an eye. The aliens thought they could control everything, and yet humanity's greatest strength had always been their will to survive, no matter the cost. The shuttle's engines screamed as they neared the target zone, the rough terrain barely visible beneath them in the dim light. Blackwell's thoughts raced. This was it. The culmination of years of strategy, the coming together of every lesson humanity had learned. There was no second chance. There were no guarantees. They would either win this fight or be forgotten. The shuttle touched down softly on the rocky outcrop overlooking the alien command post. The crew quickly disembarked, weapons in hand, their boots heavy against the earth as they moved toward the objective. The compound sprawled before them, a sleek fortress of alien design, but beneath its cold exterior, Blackwell could already feel the cracks. "There's no turning back," Jace muttered as he surveyed the sprawling base ahead of them. "We've never needed turning back," Blackwell replied, his voice calm, but there was something else there, something that carried the weight of a people who had fought too hard, too long, to simply give up. "Move out. Now." The group split, each member taking their position, while Blackwell and Jace made their way toward the center of the command structure. They moved like shadows through the darkened corridors, unseen by the enemy, a phantom force that struck in silence. Every step felt heavier than the last, but Blackwell knew this was the moment that would define humanity's future. As they approached the heart of the alien compound, Blackwell signaled for a pause. The air was thick with anticipation, the sound of their breathing the only thing that anchored them to reality. The laser plasma displays on their wrist gear flickered, showing the alien commanders preparing for retaliation. Time was running out. "We're in position," Mackay's voice crackled through their comms. "The distraction's set. They won't see this coming." Blackwell's eyes narrowed as he glanced toward Jace. "It's up to them now. We'll make the first strike." Jace, his expression taut, nodded. "And if we fail?" "There's no failing," Blackwell said, his tone flat. "We don't stop until it's done." The first shot rang out in the distance, the signal that the charge had begun. The earth beneath them seemed to shudder with the force of the explosion, but Blackwell didn't flinch. His body, now accustomed to the intensity of the fight, moved without hesitation, every movement calculated, every decision made with the knowledge that they were teetering on the edge of everything. "Go!" Blackwell shouted, and the team surged forward, weapons raised. They moved with the force of a storm, fast, deliberate, and merciless. The alien defenses, caught off guard by the sudden assault, began to falter. The command center, once a symbol of their domination, was now a target under fire. In that moment, as Blackwell pressed forward, he felt it, a surge of energy, raw and pure, as if the land beneath him was giving its own roar of defiance. The alien forces were stumbling, disoriented, unable to cope with the relentless human will being poured into the assault. The foundation of their invincibility was crumbling. "We're doing it," Jace said, his voice shaking with disbelief. "No," Blackwell corrected, his eyes fixed on the target. "We're just getting started." A series of explosions detonated around them, the alien shields beginning to fail as their communication systems were wiped out. The sound of alien soldiers scrambling to regroup filled the air, but it was too late. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't the force of their bombs, or their guns, or even their stolen technology. It was their ability to adapt, to make do with the scraps they were given, and to find strength even in the darkest corners of their world. The alien fleet, once a formidable force, was now reeling, caught in a battle they had no way of understanding. Their ships lost communication with their command base, their tactics scattered, their morale fractured. They were facing an enemy they could not predict, an enemy whose very spirit had been forged in the fires of war and survival. As Blackwell and Jace made their final push, the alien forces began to retreat, their once proud machines no match for the will of humanity. The compound was in flames, the alien technology falling apart in the wake of their strategy. And then, for a brief, fleeting moment, the silence settled. The sounds of battle faded, and in its place Blackwell heard only the distant wind, the wind of a world that had just been given a second chance. "We did it," Jay said, his voice quiet, a mix of awe and disbelief. Blackwell stood tall, staring at the wreckage of the alien command center. Humanity did it. We've always done it. They just didn't know how to fight us. The alien fleet, disorganized and broken, retreated into the skies, leaving Earth behind. Humanity had not only survived, they had taken the fight to the heart of their invaders, and they had won. And in that moment, Blackwell knew what it had always been. Earth wasn't just another planet in a galaxy of countless others. It was home, and it would never fall.